Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Define Disaster. This is Battlefield 1, and in today's video we're going to be taking a closer look at all available server options that have been introduced by the fall patch for Battlefield 1. As you must know, and as many of you will, you can now rent your own server, and this is relatively simple. However, there are only limited options to what you can customize, and we're going to be looking at those customized options as well as the prices. And last but not least, we're going to be having a little bit of a rant on the number of features and changes that you can actually do to your server, because I think many people in the Battlefield community will likely agree with me that DICE hasn't really done what the community wanted here in giving us more control of the game modes and changing some of the key aspects which most people find distaste or displeasure in the choices made by DICE. I am namely referring to things like player count limit restrictions on game modes like TDM, War Pigeons, or Domination. But with that being said, let's start off with where you can find this brand new option. It's obviously going to be under Store, where you're going to head into Rent Server, click the Beta Rent Server program, and you're now in the available options for renting your server. First, you're going to notice, of course, that you can change the name, description, and message of your server. There's not much to say here. There's not much you would want other than this. It's the way you present your server. You can name it something fancy, give it an exciting description, and maybe add a creative message. Other than that, then it's worth moving on, of course, to maps and modes. This is where you basically determine what is played on your server. So you can add, for example, Empire's Edge for Team Deathmatch, if you so will, in addition to, for example, Amiens Conquest. You can, of course, remove this. However, it is worth noting here that now says server size 24 players. Conquest servers will be 64 players. In other words, you cannot change the number of players maximally allowed for game modes that have restrictions. In other words, Battlefield or DICE is saying, if you would like to have a 64-player TDM match, you can't have it. Not even on the server you are paying your very own money for. I think this is a little bit of a cheek. Some of you will disagree, but it's important to notice that a number of people were hoping that our own servers would give us control over player counts for certain game modes. However, this seems not to be the case, at least not in this beta server program currently running now. Next up, we have a weapon options. What you can do here is not ban certain weapons or even limit the amount of snipers or shotguns being used. You can simply accept or remove the weapons from the game altogether. So if you wanted a pistol only server or melee and pistol only server, maybe a pistol and sniper rifle server only, you could do that. If you wanted to ban a specific gun or limit the number of sniper rifles being used, this sadly wouldn't be possible. Next up, then we have kits. This is very similar to what you saw on the weapons. You can ban entire kits, and there is, of course, the option here to ban elite classes, which is what people are going to do for their TDM and Domination servers, but there's not limits on the numbers you can ban. So you can't say we want a maximum of 5 snipers per team, 5 scout classes per team at once on a server, which is really what people want. I know very few people that want to actually create servers which ban entire classes. They simply want to limit certain amounts of classes being too present because they can break or ruin a game mode. For example, if half your enemy team is snipers, they're never going to take an objective, but they are going to annoy the crap out of the enemy team. Next up, then, of course, we have vehicles. Not much option here. Land vehicles, yes. Air vehicles, yes or no. Once more, no options to limit the types of vehicles available or the number of them. Very much annoys me, for example, because I think on a number of maps, you should only be allowed to have 1, maybe 2 bombers, and then other aircraft instead of 3 bombers on certain maps, which just becomes ridiculous if you have capable pilots. There is a certain element of fine-tuning that we had in previous Battlefield games on our own servers that has clearly been lost here, and it's very much of a shame, at least in my opinion. Next up, then we have Misc. These are what they are. You can read here into what you want. They're limited options. There's a number of options missing here, or options that we would have gained through plugins that we don't have from previous Battlefield games. Whether or not we're going to get them is yet to be seen. My money, however, is on that we're not probably going to see this update that we very much desire, and we're going to be stuck with the options available here. Next up, we have then rules. This is simple things like bullet damage, ticket count, respawn time, and vehicle respawn. They are self-explanatory. These are necessary, but most people are not going to play with anything other than ticket count because, of course, for bullet damage, most people will just go into a hardcore server. Respawn time, not really sure if this is much of a change necessary here. It doesn't take that long for you to be able to respawn, and therefore I don't think there's any point in changing that. Anyway, the options are what they are. Next up, we can choose what region we want to host our server in. And as of now, for some reason, Europe has no more capacity. I think they just basically sold out instantly within the first day. And as you can see, I'm not exactly in the US. As such, there is not very much of a good ping going there for me right now. US East and Asia are for some reason actually not even online right now. So you can choose where you want your server. You're obviously going to want to put it wherever is closest to you. In my case, that would be Europe. In your case, it may be the US, it may be South Africa, it could be anywhere as far as I'm concerned. Obviously choose whichever area is closest to you to get the best ping for when you yourself are playing on the server. Last but not least, then we have rental periods. How long do you want to rent this server for? And of course, the shorter you rent it, the more expensive it is going to be to pay per day. Renting it on long term is probably the best idea if you're thinking of seriously building up a community around your server. And the one kind of silver lining out of all of this is it doesn't seem to be too pricey compared to previous Battlefield games in which it was a lot more expensive to rent your own server. It's about $21, $22 if you rent your server for an entire half year per month. Obviously in total it's $130, which is not bad, remembering that it used to cost a lot more to privately or externally host servers as you would have to in Battlefield 4, Battlefield 3, even Battlefield Hardline. With that being said, those are the server options available to you. You can then basically click server and buy your server once you've set your settings. I don't actually know how you can like modify your server afterwards. I'm assuming you can, but this is how you initially set one up. Now, what about, is this program worth it? No, in no means do I think it's worth actually renting your server unless you are a big fan of the current way TDM works and all you want is a higher ticket count. With that being said though, frankly, there's going to be plenty of servers which will offer that from people who will be paying money to get that. Other than that, I see little reason. There is a serious lack of options here to create a balanced and personalized experience for Battlefield 1 as we had in Battlefield 4. And there are 3 key points I think that are missing here that really should have been part of this feature, part of the modifications that we can make. After all, this is the game for the players. This is our game. If we're putting money down for our own server, why shouldn't we allow to be modifying it in certain ways, obviously not freely, but in certain ways to make it more enjoyable to ourselves and the people we play with. Now, what about, is it worth getting a server? Paying money to get your own custom server with these settings available now? In my opinion, absolutely, and under no circumstance is it. Because the only reason or settings that are actually worth changing as of now greatly and would greatly improve game mode is for TDM domination and of course war pigeons, where you'd want to remove the heavy classes. Now, frankly, there's going to be plenty of people that will do this, and I think DICE should actually do this themselves. It's obviously broken that these classes are in the game, and that they haven't changed it yet is, in my opinion, a little bit concerning, thinking that they're probably hoping that most people will just buy servers in order to get rid of them for those game modes. On the other hand, there are 3 key features that I think DICE needs to give us access to make the community happy, to give them what they want, what I personally want, and to allow us to properly customize the experience of our Battlefield 1 time, of our Battlefield 1 playstyle, to make it a better game, to give the choice to us. Because what they've given us is fine, but there are key elements here that we really need to be able to change, and that I think a number of Battlefield players want to change as well, and DICE is shying away from it because they're kind of pissed off that we didn't accept, I think, the way that they set it out, and that we want to have it our own way. In the end though, it's our game, and if we're paying money for our servers, I think they should really be listening to what we want and not necessarily what they want. The 3 things that I think we really should be having access to, first and foremost, is more control over weather. Some people love the desert storms and the rainstorms and thunderstorms that come into the maps. Other people find them distracting and annoying. Why, DICE, can we not fully control whether or not we have weather effects or which weather effects we have on every map? We should have access to this. It's self-explanatory. I think the individual server owner should be able to decide this, whether or not he wants, for example, the desert storm, the sandstorm on Sinai Desert. I can tell you for one fact, I'd remove that thing without a second thought. Second, and this is the most controversial, and that it's going to probably upset DICE the most, but most players have been requesting it, control over player count for individual game modes. I do not understand why DICE on my own server that I'm paying them quite a lot of money to get will not allow me to change the player count, for example, for Rush from 24 to 32 or maybe even 40 players, so that, for example, I can have a proper mixed game mode server. This is currently not really possible unless you want to play Conquest for 24 players or constantly kick people from your server so that when you go from Conquest to Rush, it isn't suddenly overpopulated. Why can't we have, for example, Rush for 40 players, TDM for 40 players, Conquest for 40 players, all around having a mixed server that will allow us a little bit more action? Most people aren't playing Domination, Rush, TDM or War Pigeons, and the most frequently stated reason for that, and universally applicable to all of them, is player count. There's not enough happening in these game modes. People play Battlefield for the big action, the big explosions, the epic moments, the big battles, not for a simple skirmish 12v12. That is not what we are looking for when we're playing Battlefield. This is not a competitive shooter as much as something like Overwatch would be. Admittedly, that is of course not 12 versus 12, but even less. But it's worth noting, why have we got the game modes with so little players? And why on our own servers at least can we not change that to our own personal liking? Is DICE so afraid that nobody's going to play on their servers anymore and everybody's just going to buy their own server? They shouldn't be. That will bring them extra money because after all, they are renting the servers. They're making profit of us renting these servers. So give us the choices we desire regarding player count, or I find myself in a position actually where I'm not going to buy a server because I see little point in it. Last but not least, a thing that I am very personally a fan of, and that was a thing in Battlefield 4, is individual class and weapon balance. And I've spoken a little bit, alluded to it a little bit already in this video today. I want to be able to control how many people are using bolt action rifles on my server, not are playing the recon class, but are using bolt action rifles, how many shotguns, or maybe even how many recon players or medic players there are on a team. I think specifically this is of course for the case of shotguns, and for the case of snipers, you need to limit them on certain game modes. So you have, say, maximum 5 or 10 snipers per team. Because while usually it balances itself out, there's often a clear lack of medics and a clear overpopulation of recon players in most game modes. And this can lead to very frustrating, unfun, lack of entertaining games for both teams. That is to say, where you have too many recons on one team, which means they can't push onto the objective, but the enemy team, while holding their objective, cannot really do much to get kills because everybody's just camping in their base, sniping away. Now, this isn't the case in every game. It's not even the case in most games, but we should be able to control the balance of teams in our own address. I understand that they don't want things like admin abuse going on and bans and kicks, but I do think we should be able to control some fundamental game balances, and as they have advertised, make the game our own. This is, after all, what custom servers were about and why they were so popular in Battlefield 4. There were some amazing custom servers in Battlefield 4 that allowed for 64-player rush to actually be enjoyable because they limited snipers and they limited the amount of vehicles. They made sure more or less everything was balanced and only used maps that weren't too choke pointy and made it an enjoyable experience and not just a meat grinder like Locker or Metro. And with that being said, my mini rant and this video comes to an end. I think my opinions on the matter are relatively clear. More customization, DICE, or frankly, I'm not really interested in giving you more of my money than what I've already spent on the game to rent my own server. I want to be able to control the weather. I want to be able to control the amount of players that I have on my server independent of game mode, and I want to be able to control the class and weapon balance available to me, how many snipers, how many recon players, how many shotgun users on each team. Those are my requests to DICE, and I think DICE knows very well that similar things like this will be requested by most community members. Whether or not they give in, though, is yet to be determined. But with that being said, this is of course a very much an opinionated commentary. Leave down below in the comments your opinions on the matter, on the implementation of this server program. Do you think we should have more options available to customize? Do you agree with my list of mandatory things we should be able to change for our servers? Or are you happy with the way things are now and are ready to go and rent your own server right now? Also, feel free to leave down below in the comments for your video suggestions for Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 4. With that being said, I'd like to at this point thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.